Have you ever looked at that little padlock icon next to a website address and really, truly wondered what it's doing? Well, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to dive into some lecture notes to pull back the curtain on the Internet's invisible shield, Transport Layer Security, or TLS. We're going to find out what it is, and more importantly, all the fascinating ways it can break. Just think about it for a sec. When you see that lock in your browser, you feel safe, right? It's a symbol, a promise that your connection is private and secure. And that promise, it's all delivered by TLS. So at its heart, TLS is the system that creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between a server, like your bank's website, and your computer. You could think of it as a secret digital handshake that happens in a split second, making sure that nobody can listen in on your conversation. But here's the big question. What happens when that handshake can be faked or tricked? All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to explore how this whole security system can fail, and we'll look at it from a few different angles, from tricking the rules of the game to using busted tools, all the way down to plain old human error. So let's jump right in.
First up, tricking the protocol. These are clever attacks that don't even try to break the encryption head-on. No, instead, they manipulate the rules of the conversation itself, the very process that's supposed to set up the secure connection in the first place.
The first type is what we call a downgrade attack. Okay, picture two modern spies who know a top-secret unbreakable code. An attacker can't crack it, it's just too strong. But what if that attacker could trick the spies into thinking they can only talk using some ancient, easily cracked code that they both just happen to know from their training days? That's a downgrade attack. It forces your browser and the server to fall back to an old, vulnerable version of TLS, making it super easy to spy on. Next, we have a cipher suite negotiation attack. Now, a cipher suite is basically just the menu of encryption options that two computers can agree to use. Think of it like a list of languages they can both speak. This attack tricks them into picking the absolute weakest, simplest language on the menu, one the attacker already knows how to understand, even when both of them are perfectly capable of speaking much more secure, complex languages. So this brings up a really critical question, right? What happens when everyone follows the rules of the protocol perfectly, but the very tools they're using for the conversation, the encryption methods themselves, are just fundamentally broken? And that brings us to our second layer of failure, using broken tools. Here, the problem isn't in the rules of the conversation, but in the actual building blocks, the mathematical tools that are supposed to be scrambling your data. And wow, this slide just lays it out so clearly. On one side, you have these old, busted tools like the DES encryption algorithm. On the other, you have modern, secure standards like AES. Using anything from that first column today is like trying to build a bank vault door out of plywood instead of solid steel. It's just not going to work. So what makes these tools broken? Well, it's not just that they're old. They have actual, known mathematical weaknesses. Take a hash, for example. It's supposed to be a unique digital fingerprint for a file. But with a weak hash like MD5, an attacker can create a malicious virus that has the exact same fingerprint as a safe file. That's a collision. And using short keys? Come on, that's just like using a simple password. Any modern computer can guess it through sheer brute force. Okay, so let's keep building this out. Even if you have a perfect protocol and super strong cryptographic tools, your security can still fall apart. And this next layer is all about us, the human element. Simple mistakes in coding and system setup. These are what we call implementation bugs. Look, the TLS protocol can be a perfect blueprint for a secure fortress, right? But if the builders mess up and accidentally leave a window unlocked when they write the code, well, the blueprint doesn't really matter anymore, does it? These tiny flaws in the software can create gigantic security holes. And the most notorious example of this has to be the Heartbleed bug. It was a tiny, simple coding mistake in a really popular piece of TLS software. But this one tiny error allowed attackers to ask a server for a small piece of information, and because of the bug, the server would accidentally send back a massive chunk of its private memory. We're talking passwords, secret keys, user data, you name it. It was an absolute catastrophe, all from one little bug. And then you've got configuration problems. This is when the software itself might be perfect, but it's just been set up incorrectly. The classic example is just leaving weak default settings turned on. It's basically like buying a multi-million-dollar home security system, but you never bother to change the default password from 1234. One of the most dangerous configuration mistakes is when a system doesn't bother to properly check a website's security certificate. That certificate is like its official ID card. If your browser doesn't check that ID properly, it leaves the door wide open for a man-in-the-middle attack. This is where an attacker can just slip in, impersonate the website, and sit invisibly in the middle of your connection, reading every single thing you send and receive. Okay, now we're getting to the really subtle and, honestly, the most fascinating type of attacks. These don't target the protocol or the crypto or even the code directly. No, instead they just listen. They listen for secrets that the computer accidentally leaks just by doing its normal job.
These are called side-channel attacks. And the best analogy is this. Instead of trying to blow the door off a bank vault with dynamite, you're a safecracker. You just press your ear to the metal and quietly listen for the tiny clicks of the tumblers as they fall into place to figure out the combination. Attackers are doing the digital version of that, listening to the physical side effects of a computer at work.
And some of the ways they do this are just wild. Timing attacks literally measure how long it takes a computer to do a calculation. Tiny, microscopic delays can actually give away clues about the secret keys inside. Then you have famous attacks like Spectre and Meltdown, which watch the ghostly patterns of how a chip accesses its own memory. Some can even measure the tiny changes in a device's power consumption to figure out what it's thinking. It's less like breaking a lock and more like reading its mind.
So, we've seen attacks on the rules, the tools, the code, and even the physical hardware. What does this all add up to? Let's tie it all together and get to the single most important lesson from all of this.
And this right here illustrates the core message perfectly. TLS security isn't just one thing. It's a chain. It starts with the abstract rules of the protocol, then it goes to the crypto tools being used, then to how well the code is written, how the system is set up, and it goes all the way down to the physical silicon chip it's running on. And the key takeaway is that a weakness in any one of these links can destroy the entire system. You can have the world's strongest protocol, but it means absolutely nothing if it's coded with a bug like Heartbleed. You can have flawless code, but it's worthless if it's configured to use some ancient broken encryption. Every single link in that chain has to be strong.
Which brings us right back to where we started. Is that little lock icon a guarantee of safety? Well, the real answer is, it depends. It depends entirely on the strength of the weakest link in that very long, very complex security chain.